First, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I know you could be home watching The Big Bang Theory or here in Sun Valley enjoying a gorgeous night, so it's an extra compliment that you'd spend an hour with me here. I pledge to you I'm going to send you away with useful information, and we're also going to have a good time. But before I start, I have to say I feel slightly intimidated and humbled standing right in front of Myrtle Bradshaw, the woman who should be up here talking. I should be sitting down learning from her. But another round of applause for Myrtle, please. I interviewed 275 centenarians, and I can honestly tell you I've never met a better looking centenarian or a warmer one. She's really a treasure, so I honor you. All right, I'm a big believer that if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. So we're going to start actually on this journey of discovery and longevity by actually calculating each and every one of your life expectancy. So in other words, how long are you going to live? Believe it or not, I work with the University of Minnesota on this very topic, longevity metrics, and I can ask you 8 questions here and calculate within a margin of about 15% for an average person like you. I can't figure in accidents or, if you have a secret crack habit, which I doubt you do. But I can calculate within about 15% of how long you live with 8 questions. All right, so I'm going to ask 8 questions. Your job, number 1, is to raise your hand if the question pertains to you. And number 2, and this is the hard part after cocktail hour, remember how many times you raise your hand. Okay, ready. They start easy and then they get hard. Okay, first question. Raise your hand if you sleep at least 7.5 hours at least 5 nights a week. 7.5 hours, 5. Oh, well rusted. Way above average there. Raise your hand if you move at least 45 minutes every day. Again, in Iowa, I get like 3 hands. Yeah, okay. Raise your hand if you eat at least 3 honest servings of vegetables every single day, and French fries and ketchup do not count. 3 honest servings of vegetable. Okay, a little lighter there, about 60%. Raise your hand if you have not, and I underscore not, had unprotected sex with a stranger. I said not. I like you guys already. We're going to hang out. I'll tell you, I asked that question in New York City about a month ago to a big room full of people, and exactly 0 hands went up. And after a long, uncomfortable pause, some guy broke the silence by saying, "Do you mean this week?" But these are real questions. Okay. Raise your hand if you have at least 3 good friends who, number 1, you can have a meaningful conversation with them. Number 2, you can call them on a bad day and they'll actually care. And number 3, you actually like them. They have to make all 3. There we go. Well-connected community. Raise your hand if you belong to a faith-based community. It could be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter. Belong to a faith-based, wait, keep your hands up. Belong to a faith-based community and show up at least 4 times a month. All right, we have 3 hands left, okay. You'll see why. Raise your hand if you've not smoked in the last 5 years. Not smoked in the last 5 years. Okay, almost all of you, God love you. And finally, raise your hand if you have the desire and the health. You believe you have the desire and you believe you have the health to live to age 90. At least age 90. Fantastic. Almost all of you. You'd be surprised how many people don't raise their hand on that one. So that actually, Paul Costas, National Institutes on Aging, found the biggest determinant of how long you live. And he actually found that you are the best predictor of how long you're going to live. You're better than your doctor because you knew 3 things your doctor doesn't. You know exactly how you've lived up until this point. You know how you feel today. And you know how you intend to act in the future. So those are huge predictors, and if you think you're going to live to 90, that bodes very well. Okay, now how long are you going to live? If you raised your hand at least twice, and you're a man, you can plan on about 68 years of life expectancy. Some of you are statistically dead, I'm sure. If you're a woman, 72. If you raised your hand at least 5 times and you're a man, life expectancy is 77. If you're a woman, it's 81. And if you raised your hand at least 7 times and you're a man, life expectancy is 88. And if you're a woman, it's 92. Did anybody raise their hand all 8 times? Could you guys stand up, please? If you raised your hand all 8 times, please stand up. I saw one of you back there. Go own it, own it. Can we give them a big St. Luke's round of applause? You guys are all now dismissed to the bar. We'll give your seats to somebody else who needs it. Okay, so now you know how you're going to live. Most of what we think leads to longevity is misguided and in many cases indeed just plain wrong. Something called the Danish twin study established that only about 20% of how long the average person lives is dictated by genes. If your mom and dad lived a long time, it doesn't necessarily mean you will. Likewise, if your parents died at 50, that isn't necessarily a yoke to carry through life. 80% of how long you live, in other words, really the lion's share of what's in your control lies with your lifestyle and your environment. So based on that assumption, widely held throughout the academic community, I teamed up with National Geographic and the National Institutes on Aging a few years ago to, in a sense, reverse engineer longevity. So instead of relying on university studies or news reports, we went right to the source. I hired a demographer, or National Geographic did, 3 demographers. And we found 5 parts of the world where people are living statistically longer than the rest of us. 11 times more centenarians in one of the places. Life expectancy is almost a decade longer in one of the places. At age 50, there are 2 or 3 times more people reaching a healthy age 90 than we have here in America. So these people have the outcomes that we want. And then we brought together a team of experts who could help us go to these places using an established methodology to distill down what are the common denominators. What are we seeing in all 5 of these areas that either explain longevity or at least are highly correlated. And I'm going to tell you what those 9 things are, but first I'd like to actually take you to these blue zones. I'll go back here. This is the first blue zone here. Sardinia, Italy. Jumping ahead of me, there we go. Bam. About 200 miles off the coast of Italy on the island of Sardinia. Not the entire island, just a cluster of 14 villages, about 42,000 people. You have the highest percentage of male centenarians in the world. About 10 times, 11 times more male 100-year-olds than any place else in the world. And it's only in one area. This is actually the home of a Bronze Age culture that was pushed up in the highlands about 7,000 years ago. And they've been there since about the time of Christ. And they've incubated a set of lifestyle and environments that's yielding extraordinary longevity. It's in the middle of that blue bullseye there. A place called Villa Grande, ground zero of world longevity, a village of about 12,000 people. In that one little village. In America, you'd expect to see only 1 centenarian per 5,000 people. But here we saw 5 centenarians in just one village of 1,000 people. So we struck off to explain why. And here they're not only living a long time, but at 102, still going to their garden, chopping wood, and beating a guy 65 years younger than him in an arm wrestle. And this, by the way, was at 7:30 in the morning after a tumbler of red wine. Secret or no secret. So this is, I work with a group of very smart professors at the University of Sassari, and they actually surveyed about 300 centenarians over time to find out what they've done for most of their lives. And we found that the three things that most highly correlated with longevity in Sardinia were, number one, barley consumption. They grind it into a bread. We don't know why. We were kind of hoping to be that red wine, but sometimes evidence is inconvenient. Number two was the number of daughters they had. Yeah, the guys most likely to reach 100 had 5 or more daughters. Now, we don't know if that's because daughters tend to take care of their aging fathers, or if you can survive 5 adolescent daughters, making it to 100 is no problem. But it seemed to work for them. And, but the biggest determinant was your career. About half of Sardinia are farmers. This was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. And the other half are shepherds. Well, the farmers, it turns out, aren't doing any better than their Italian counterparts when it comes to longevity. It's the shepherds who are living a long time. Now, farmers tend to have really active periods during the year. The growing season, they're very active, and then they're pretty sedentary. Conversely, these shepherds, they work a little bit every day. They don't work all that hard. They kind of get up when the sun's warm, like I suspect some people might do here in Sun Valley. But they wake up when the sun's warm. They'll go out and they'll spend a few hours with their animals, mostly sheep, grazing with their animals. Sometimes they have to go away for weeks at a time. They'll stop for lunch. They'll take a nap. And then by 5 o'clock, they're usually back in the village having red wine. So it's gentle, regular, low-intensity physical activity. They had to come up with a diet that was portable. They developed a type of bread made of barley called carta de musica that's unleavened and lasts for a year. Grass-fed sheep's milk cheese, pecorino, which is what they're eating mostly when they're in the field, their own sheep, very high in omega-3 fatty acids. When they're home, since about 1950 till about now, very pure Mediterranean diet. And then they developed a type of wine called Cardinal from the Grenache grape that usually made at home that has the highest levels of polyphenols. Nothing like dirty boots to add terroir and bouquet. But what's interesting about, and this is where wisdom comes in, Sardinians figured out that when you actually ferment the grape juice with the skins and the seeds, it's healthier. Most of the polyphenols or the antioxidants are found in the skins and the seeds. So they yield a wine 3 times higher in antioxidants than any known wine in the world, and they apply this medicine regularly. And then they do eat a little bit of meat. Surprisingly little meat. It's usually a celebratory food, usually Sunday after church, never beef, usually pork, a little bit of chicken. But pork was traditionally, over the last 100 years, the meat they ate, usually as a condiment, though, as opposed to the main feature of the meal. More importantly, our team found, when it comes to the longevity formula, was their attitudes. You'd never see these long-lived men putting their interest in sports or their friends or work ahead of their family. A fanatic zeal for the family. They required a very strong family unit over the years. These 2 kids have been married for 70 years. And unlike most of the Mediterranean area, in the highlands of Sardinia, it's not the men who rule the roost, it's the women. They wear the pants. They manage the house. They're up on the roof fixing the shingles. They grow the garden. They also wield a nasty rifle. Unlike America, where social equity seems to peak at about age 30, here the older you get, the more celebrated you are. In your 70s, 80s, and 90s, you still see people working for City Hall, advising the government, on city patrols. They always live with a child or a grandchild, but not as just recipients of care. It's their job to help with the kids, run the garden, cook. They possess the agricultural knowledge. These people up in the highlands, even the shepherds, they require a delicate understanding of climatic patterns and pests and so forth. This recipe for wine for this village, the Kananao wine, rests with this gentleman's 103. And these guys who get together. Their bread, we found, this was interesting. Most of the breads that are eaten in the home are sourdough bread. Most of the time when you eat a piece of bread, it adds to the glycemic load of your meal. In other words, it quickly metabolizes into sugar and sends your insulin soaring. This bread actually brings your insulin response down. It's leavened not with yeast, but with bacteria, lactobacillus. And it turns out that this lactobacillus is held by the grandmothers. They carry the starter dough, which they inoculate the new dough, and they know the process. It takes a long time to make it, but just about every meal in the highlands of Sardinia for the past 100 years will include one piece of this bread, and over time, it makes a huge difference. So this notion of keeping aging parents nearby is exceedingly important. Something called the grandmother effect has been observed by academics in several species, including humans, favor not only the mortality, but also the health of offspring, of children and grandchildren. So it's this beautiful virtuous circle we see in Sardinia. On the other side of the planet, about 800 miles south of Tokyo, on the island of Okinawa, we found the world's longest lived women. Among women over 60, you'll find 30 times more centenarians than you will in America here. And it's not just the women, the whole population does well. This is really ground zero of longevity by many measurements. They have the longest disability-free life expectancy in the world. They tend to live a long time. They tend to die very quickly. They elude most of the diseases that kill us: heart disease, cancer, diabetes. 7 good years longer than the average American, 5 times as many centenarians, 1/5 the rate of the big cancers that are killing us, and 1/6 the rate of America's biggest killer, heart disease. So that's what's getting them to 100. So they're living a long time. They tend to die quickly in their sleep. Occasionally I happen to know after sex, but I don't get into that in detail. With a lot left over for the grandparents, the average American will spend about 90% of their lifelong health care dollars in the last 3 or 4 years of their life. This period's called the morbidity period. It's when we're disabled. It's not all that pleasant to be around. In Okinawa, that morbidity period is compressed to under a year. So they're getting out of life what most of us want. So once again, what are they doing that we can learn from? Is it genes? No. Okinawans have been intermarrying with the rest of Southeast Asia since the 16th century. They do eat mostly a plant-based diet, vegetables we'd recognize, other vegetables that are foreign to us. They have a 2,500-year-old dietary pattern summed up by 3 words: hara, hachi, bu. Which essentially means stop eating when your stomach is 80% full. And this is often manifested at the table. You'll actually see them put 1/5 of their food aside. But more often at the counter, where the practice there is not to serve it family style, but to pre-plate food, put the right amount on the plate, and then put the leftovers away ahead of time, anticipating the tendency to overeat when you have pots of food in front of you. I asked you that question about loneliness. Raise your hand if you have 3 good friends who you can count on a bad day. That's actually the measurement that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation uses as a measurement of loneliness. If you are technically lonely, in other words, if you could not say you have 3 good friends, your life expectancy is about 8 years less than it would be if you're well connected. So it's something we overlook when we think about health in this country. 20% of Americans are isolated. So they've taken on a risk factor as dangerous, statistically speaking, as a smoking habit. In Okinawa, you don't have to worry about being lonely. We don't live in a culture that automatically we're going to have friends. But in Okinawa, when you're 5 years old, you're put in a committed social network called a moai, and you're expected to travel through life together. These 5 girls have belonged to the same moai for 97 years. Their average age is 102. So they make Myrtle young. They've been meeting every single day. They get together, they drink sake, they gossip about the village. They argue about who that hot guy liked best back in 1941. He was mine. But they care for each other. They don't have nurses or long-term care insurance. But every day they meet, and if one of them doesn't show up, the other 4 are putting on their kimonos and walking across the village to go check on their friends. One day when I was there, one of the girls didn't show up. The other 4 went over there. Now, at 102, if you fall down and hit your hip or hit your head and somebody's not there in a matter of hours, it's game over. And unless we have a nurse or something, or we live in a home, you might not be found. But here there's this cultural institution that assures that people are looked after. It doesn't require government intervention, doesn't require employers. It's just something that's worked for thousands of years. There's no word in the Okinawan dialect for retirement. The sort of artificial punctuation between your productive life and then all of a sudden your life of repose. People don't necessarily work 8 hours a day, but instead their life is imbued with purpose, a word that is summed up with the Japanese or Okinawan word ikigai. Essentially means the reason for which I wake up in the morning. And the instrument we use, we asked every centenarian we met if they could articulate their ikigai, their sense of purpose, and they could do it to a T. For this 102-year-old, it was passing down martial arts. For this 97-year-old, it was getting out of bed, and instead of going to the gym, he put on his rubber suit, his bamboo goggles, and he'd go spear fish and bring it back to his grandchildren's family at lunchtime. So it was an excuse to kind of mingle with his grandkids. And in 97 is yet another guy who could beat me at an arm wrestle. Kamada-san, 102, her ikigai was her great-great-great-granddaughter. These 2 girls are separated in age by 101.5 years. And I had to ask her what it feels like to hold a descendant more than a century younger than her. And the translation came back as it feels like leaping into heaven. Kind of makes you look forward to being 100. So then my editor at National Geographic, legendary editor, his name is Peter Miller, one of the guys who shows up to work every day wearing khakis and a blue blazer and a pencil behind his ear. Remember that, a pencil? But he said you have to find America's blue zone. And believe it or not, we found the highest concentration of centenarians up from where I'm from, around Minnesota. On the prairies of Minnesota, these farmer communities. But then we found out, if you peel away the onion, that was because most of the young people moved away to places like here, leaving an artificially high number of the oldest old. But statistically, the culture of longevity in America is found in a perhaps unusual place, 80 miles east of Los Angeles, off the San Bernardino Freeway. By the way, there are 4 chairs right here that I'll bet you would love to be sit in for those of you who may not enjoy standing. But Loma Linda, California, you get off the Loma Linda exit, and the first thing you see, now remember, I just been in Sardinia and Okinawa, these wonderfully exotic places. All of a sudden, I'm in the America's Blue Zone, off the freeway exit, and I see on my right a Del Taco, and on my left, a Wiener Hut. And I'd arrived at America's Blue Zone. And I'm like, what's going on here? Well, it turns out Loma Linda has the highest concentration of Seventh-day Adventists in the world. Adventists are conservative Methodists who distinguish themselves from other Christians in that, number 1, they celebrate their Sabbath on Saturday instead of Sunday, and number 2, they evangelize with health. And for a long time, the National Institutes on Health have been following Adventists. Something called the Adventist Health Study has followed 103,000 American Adventists for 30 years. So this is gold standard epidemiology. So Right now in America, life expectancy for women is about 80, but life expectancy for Adventist women is 89, and for men, the difference is even more dramatic. They're living 11 years longer. So think about this for a minute. These aren't people living in some exotic corner of the world. These people are living off the San Bernardino Freeway next to the Wiener Hut. And they're living a decade longer than the rest of us. Now, is this because they have a genetic advantage? No. You look at Adventists, and it looks like a congregation that could be here in Sun Valley. Mostly people of European extraction, but you have Hispanics, Asians, African American. It's a melting pot. So how are they getting this extra decade? Well, there's a few things. Number one, they take this Sabbath very seriously. They call it a sanctuary in time. And from sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday, no matter how busy they are, no matter what work is telling them what to do, no matter what the social schedule is dictating, no matter where the kids need to be driven, they stop everything. And for 24 hours, Friday night they're usually family time, dinner. Next day, Saturday morning, they have their religious service. Saturday at noon, they have these potlucks. And then hardwired right in their scriptures, on Saturday afternoon, they take a nature walk, the definition of which has evolved over the past few decades, but nevertheless, hardwired right in their weekly routine. This is not something you get excited about the fun run or the marathon and do for a year or two. They do it every single week for years, decades, and a lifetime. They get their diet directly from the Bible. Biblical. You know that God handed down, and by the way, I'm not particularly a religious person, so don't worry. But God, I had to read the Old Testament for this story. You read Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, God lays out the diet of the Garden of Eden. Black and white, very clear. All the trees that bear fruit and all the plants that bear seeds. And then one stanza later, she talks about green plants. So Adventists are eating beans, nuts, seeds of all sorts. They're mostly vegetarians. And Adventists hang out with other Adventists. We now know that health behaviors are as contagious as catching a cold. And because these Adventists, though they're not geographically isolated like the other two blue zones, they are a little bit culturally isolated. Because the Sabbath, their kids can't play football on Friday night, they're not going to dances Saturday afternoon. So Adventists tend to hang out with other Adventists, and they tend to share these healthy values, which circulate through the social network, and they get reinforced over time. They're not meeting around the barbecue and smoking cigars and drinking whiskey like my parties. I'm just kidding. This is a culture that's yielded Ellsworth Wareham. I met Ellsworth in '95. Amazing dude, multimillionaire, I happen to know. Yet when a contractor wanted $6,000, remember he's 95, he's got all the money he's ever going to spend, $6,000 to put this huge privacy fence around his backyard. Ellsworth is like, well, for that kind of money, I'll do it myself. So for the next 3 days, in blistering heat, it's like 90 degrees, he's shoveling cement, hauling timbers, and predictably, perhaps on the fourth day, he ends up in the emergency room, but not as the open heart patient. That's Ellsworth on the left doing open heart surgery. 20 times a month. 95 years old. I actually got Dr. Oz. We did an Oprah show together. I got Dr. Oz in his operating room. And Oz sat through an operation with him, came out astounded. And Oz said to him, so what is your secret to being 95 and still doing 4-hour operations? He ripped off his mask. He said, I don't hang out with old people. Ed Raleigh's 106. He's got his pilot's license, but he's a working cowboy, starts his day with the swim, and on the weekends he likes to put on the boards, he says. Throw Brewsterdale. This is how you want to be at 106. And then my favorite, and I got very close to her, Marge Jeton, 105, woke up every morning at 5:30 a.m., very routine, read her Bible. Then she had breakfast, and she's very prescriptive about her breakfast. Slow cook oatmeal, not the fast cook stuff, not the quick cook. nuts, dates, topped with soy milk, followed by what she called a prune juice shooter. So you can imagine that, and then moving right on out. And then she'd go down and pump iron at 105, get on her stationary bike, so go pump out another half hour, and then get in her 1994 Cadillac and barrel down the San Bernardino Freeway, where she volunteered for 7 different organizations. No, she didn't have an easy life. 77 wonderful years of marriage, and loved her husband deeply, and heard a clunk on the floor one day, and her husband died, and her marriage ended abruptly, and she didn't know what to do with herself. And she said in the months that followed that she could feel herself dying. Those are her words. I could feel myself dying, and I realized the world was not going to come to me. And that's when she amped up her volunteer efforts. She started volunteering for her church, and then a recycling program. Then she adopted a 76-year-old woman to take care of. And then Tuesday and Thursday, she'd show up. Remember, she's 105. She'd show up to the Loma Linda Senior Center, where like 68-year-olds would hang out, to go, as she put it, to go help out the old folks. Now, you guys don't know this about me, but in addition to, before my work here, when I was out of college, I led a series of hardcore expeditions, biked across the Sahara Desert, biked from Alaska to Argentina, 15,000 miles, all downhill. Crossed Siberia and bog, but the most harrowing expedition by far was riding shotgun with Marge Chaton down the San Bernardino Freeway. She told me once, I was asking her, what does the body feel like at 100? And actually, you know, the body kind of stops aging at about 90 in many biological ways. I said, what does the body feel like at 105? And she thought about it for a moment, looked over at me. She said, well, I'll tell you one thing. I feel a lot sexier at 105 than I did at 104. No wonder why she lived so long. So I wrote up these three cultures for a cover story, a geographic. Then I wrote the first book, Blue Zones. I made money for the first time in my life, and I took it right away, and like a good explorer, I went and blew it on more exploration. I hired my demographers, worked for another year, and found a 4th blue zone, the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica. It's about 100 miles long, 30 miles wide. Interestingly, though they spend 1/15 the amount we do on health care, they yield about 3 times more people who make it to a healthy age 90 than Americans do. So this whole myth that you have to spend trillions on health care, I will argue, and I'm going to argue more, that it's wrong-minded. We are just aiming at the wrong target, and Costa Rica is the perfect example. This is Felipe, 106. Still hunts his lunch with a slingshot and has a 48-year-old girlfriend who was kind of hot. And then the final blue zone, about 25 miles off of Turkey, the island of Ikaria, Greece, completely isolated from the rest of Western civilization until about the mid-70s, mostly because they had no ports. But this enabled a rather pure incubation of a set of health habits. They have the purest form of the Mediterranean diet in the world. You know, the Mediterranean diet shows up different whether you're in Spain or Italy or France or Northern Africa, but here they adhere to it most strictly. They eat fish and beans and citrus and olive oil and a little bit of wine. We found 3 herbs, catnip, also yerba buena, sage, and endemic oregano that we found have, they're anti-inflammatories, powerful anti-inflammatories, and they're diuretics. People in Korea drink these teas almost every day for almost their whole life. And they're not only living 8 years longer than the rest of us, what's most interesting, they have about 20% the rate of dementia. If you hit 85 in this country, there is about a 50% chance you're suffering from dementia. In Ikaria, it's about a 10%. So they're not only living a long time, they're staying sharp to the very end. At age 105, still administering their flock on an ATV. 102 still playing music, and almost all of them, by the way, in all blue zones, they're still tending their garden. They have a connection with their food. They're getting regular low-intensity physical activity and emerging with healthy vegetables. I like to tell the story of this little fellow here. The guy on the right, his name is Stamatis Moriaitis. Now, when Stamatis was 22, industrious young guy, he moves to America to pursue the American dream. And he gets to America, and he's a painter, he's a hardworking guy. Right away starts having success. He saves enough money to buy a Chevrolet. He marries a Greek-American girl. He buys a house in the suburbs. Has 3 kids. But at age 66, he develops lung cancer. Goes to 3 doctors. They all say it's terminally, you have 6 months to live. So instead of dying in Detroit, where he was living, he decides, forget that, I'm moving back to Korea. I'll get married by the Aegean with my ancestors, and burial bill 1/10 as much. We'll have a lot more left over for his kids. So he moves to Korea. Moves in with his parents. 66 years old, his wife. Those of you who think you have it bad with returning college students, but he starts breathing the air, drinking these teas, drinking wine, eating this Mediterranean diet. He reconnects with his religion. His friends come over and see him. He starts feeling pretty good. 6 months comes and goes, and he feels okay. He goes out and he plants a garden. He doesn't really feel like he's going to be around to harvest the garden, but he likes the thought that his wife will harvest these vegetables and they'll think of him. Well, to make a long story medium, he completely forgets to die. 37 years later, when I meet him, he has a vineyard producing 200 liters of wine every year, all of which he drinks. So of course, as being a curious journalist, I asked him what his secret was. And he just, I was pretty sure it wasn't his ability to match plaids. And he just sort of shrugs and he goes, I don't know, I guess I just forgot to die. Which seems flippant, because he didn't do chemotherapy, he didn't take any drugs, he came to die. And all of a sudden he lived. And it turns out he gave voice to something I had been observing in all of these blue zones. In none of these blue zones do you find these spry centenarians who said at age 50, well, God darn it, I'm going to get on that longevity diet and live another 50 years. They don't go buy a treadmill or join a gym or start calling 800 number and buy supplements. In fact, they have no idea how they got to be 100. They'll guess, but they're wrong most of the time. They don't know how they got to live so long any more than a tall man knows why he or she is tall, why he is tall. The bottom line is that longevity happened to these people. It's an important idea, because when I started, I really expected to find some herb or some compound like resveratrol that explained it. But no. In all these cases, longevity was a residue. It was something that was not pursued, but it's something that ensued from their environment. So when you look at all 5 blue zones, you see the same things happening over and over and over again. Number one, except for Marge, nobody exercises. The holy grail of health that we think in America, none of these populations exercise. In fact, the average American burns fewer than 100 calories a day engaged in exercise. Public health, unmitigated failure. I hate to say it. Exercise works for a small sliver of Americans. In blue zones, people are nudged to move all day long. Every 20 minutes, they're nudged. They're in their garden. They live in deconvenience houses. They're doing their own housework and their kitchen work. They're in there grinding corn or kneading bread by hand. When it comes time to go to a friend's house or go out to eat, it always occasions a walk. They're keeping their metabolism at a higher level rather than letting it drop into a hibernated state, which it does after about 75 minutes for all of us. They suffer the same stresses that we do. You think these people are different? They're not. They worry about their kids, they worry about their health, they worry about their finances. Most blue zones, in fact, are under what we consider American poverty line. But what they have that we are forgetting are these sacred daily rituals to reverse the stress and hurry and worry of our lives. and to reduce the inflammation. Every time you feel hurried or worried, intense, it triggers an inflammatory response, which is the root of every age-related disease, whether it's heart disease, several kinds of cancer, even Alzheimer's. Stress literally shrinks your brain and wrinkles your skin. Ladies tend to pay attention to that one. In blue zones, the Adventists pray several times a day. That's their way of downshifting. The Okinawans have ancestor veneration. They have a shrine in their living room. They spend a little time remembering where they came from. The Icarians and the Costa Ricans, they take a nap. Napping, by the way, is associated with about 1/3 lower rates of heart disease. So napping is a good thing, something we learned in kindergarten. And the Sardinians, they just do happy hour, which is what I've adopted, but actually a very good practice because it kind of forces you to stop a little bit of alcohol, socialize with your friends. They have vocabulary for purpose. You know the most dangerous year of your life, statistically speaking? It's the year you retire. It's a 3-fold spike in mortality the year you retire compared to your last year of work. 3 times more likely to die. Why is that? Do you turn 65 and start smoking crack? Or driving fast? No. It's like when we're young with young families or our jobs. Well, we have built-in purpose. We got to get them. But all of a sudden that's gone. And we don't have a culture that necessarily celebrates age. So you go down to Florida for a while and pretty soon that gets boring. In blue zones, they actually have vocabulary for purpose. Words like plan de vida or ikigai that imbue their entire adult life adds about 7 years to life expectancy. When it comes to what they consume, I just wrote another book now, which second New York Times bestseller. I know I'm bragging, but I'm proud of it. But it's mostly focused on food. I believe that the runway for most health is through our mouth. That's how we start getting healthy. And I hired 3 dietitians at the University of Minnesota. We just sold 155 dietary surveys to find out what centenarians have really eaten throughout their lives. And we found a few remarkable things. First of all, most of them drink, which, judging by the activity out on the patio, it's good news for most of you. Drinkers actually outlive non-drinkers, which is not to say if you're not drinking now you should start, but a couple, 2 and maybe even 3 drinks a day, blue zone, is probably good for you. And no, you can't save up all week long and have 21 on Saturday night. Plant-based diet, 90% of the dietary, and I will go toe-to-toe on with anybody on this, 90% of the dietary intake on average in all blue zones comes from plants or lightly processed plant-based products. 65% of that, and this flies right in the face of this paleo nonsense, 65% come from complex carbohydrates. And people think carbohydrates and oh, they're not good for me. But you got to remember, lollipops are carbohydrates, but so are lentils. So we're talking about the lentil end of things. Sourdough bread, whole grains, about 50% of the Okinawan diet for the first 50 years of a centenarian's life was one food. Anybody want to guess what it was? Longest lived woman in the... Rice. I'm hearing rice. That makes sense, but it's sweet potatoes. They call it emo. It's a purple sweet potato. You can get it in Asian. It's delicious, actually. They get sick of it, but that's what they ate. And then the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world, I already heard somebody say it, beans. On average, they're eating about a cup of beans a day. Beans, penny for penny, give you more protein than beef. They tend to push out the unhealthier fats. In blue zones, people are eating meat, but only about 5 times per month on average. It's usually a condiment, except for 1 time a month they're blowout. Maybe 3 eggs a week tops. No cow's dairy. Not one of these 5 blue zones do people consume a significant amount of cow's dairy. You'll have a little pecorino cheese or goat from feta, but no cow's dairy. Not a lot of fish either, by the way. Fish about 3 times a week on average. But beans are the cornerstone. And what they know that we don't know is how to make beans taste good. If you go to my website, bluezones.com, there's a recipe for Icarian stew. And if you make that at home and don't like it, you email me at dan@bluezones.com and I'll send you $1. Icarian stew, black-eyed peas, garlic, tomatoes, red onion, finished with a virgin olive oil. It's fantastic and it's satisfying. And then the other lesson they teach us is about not thinking about adding foods. Food industry spends $9 billion a year trying to convince us we need more food. Well, as you know, most Americans have eaten themselves way past the point of health. It's not with another omega-3 fatty acid or essential nutrients or vitamin E or any of that crap. None of the people in Blue Zones took supplements. They thought about how to take things out of their diet. So they were consuming about 250 fewer calories a day than the average American. Not a lot, nothing that we couldn't tackle. That hata hachi boo, stop at 80%. The same dietary pattern occurs in every Blue Zone. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. Research shows you actually consume fewer calories with a huge breakfast, with proteins, even some fat, complex carbohydrates. And then the foundation on which all of this rests is how they connect. They tend to invest in their children, keep their aging parents nearby, and invest in their spouse. They tend to belong to faith-based communities. We know that people who go to some faith-based community and show up at least 4 times a month live 4 to 14 years longer than people who don't. That might be because they're less likely to engage in risky behavior, or they have one day a week where they have ritualistic de-stressing. They might have a better social network, or there might be a God and God said. We just know it works, and it works the best for inner city minorities. And then the cornerstone of every Blue Zone when it comes to the way they set up their community is how they connect. This is really a big one. If you only remember one thing from this speech, remember this. We now know that if your 3 best friends are unhealthy and obese, there's a 150% better chance that you'll be overweight yourself. Just as your mother told you, you kind of are who you hang out with. If your friends smoke, you're about 60% more likely to smoke. If they drink too much, you're about 60% more likely to drink too much. Even unhappiness and loneliness are contagious. So that little circle of friends that you curate to spend your time with, I wouldn't necessarily tell you to dump your old friends. But I will tell you, if all your old friends are the type who belly up to the bar every night or gather around the barbecue, that it would make sense to augment your social network with poor people. And I know this community. I know probably none of you have that. But you'd be shocked how many middle Americans find this an idea to think about. So you probably look at this and say, this probably makes a lot of sense to it. And some of you think it's common sense, though that's not what Americans do. But anyway, but how do you get people to do it long enough to make a difference? Because when it comes to longevity, there's no short-term fix. So we spend some money in this country on prevention. We spend about 4% of our total healthcare dollars on prevention. And that money, about $110 billion, is spent mostly on diets, supplements, and different physical activity, exercise programs. And by the way, they're not a bad idea. It's a good idea to get people thinking about the right foods to eat, to think about getting active. So for a tiny minority of people, I think supplements might help, maybe vitamin D. But the problem with all of them is that occasionally they're short-term successes, but they are uniformly long-term failures. And when it comes to longevity, if you're not doing it for a long time, it ain't going to work. So let's just say I got all of you guys on the Blue Zone diet, 100% of you on the Blue Zone diet. I would lose, in the best scenarios, I would lose 10% of you in the first 3 months. I'd lose a full 90% of you in the first 7 months. Our brains are hardwired for novelty. We get bored. We lose discipline. We lose almost all of you in just 2 years. Diets are great for selling books and Weight Watcher programs. I defy anybody to tell me a diet works for more than 3% after 2 years. Same thing with exercise programs. People tend to start them after the holiday with lots of zeal, but then they run out of gas. And Most people are off them in 2 years. And even if I'd come back from Blue Zones with the pill guaranteed to reverse aging, Americans wouldn't take it long enough to make a difference. So if that doesn't work, what does? Well, I paid attention in these Blue Zones. And it wasn't about trying to change individual behaviors. And in 2008, about 7 years ago now, I guess, I got another grant for geographic, and I studied populations that were unhealthy and got healthier. And I found a couple interesting things. Never has it worked in America. We have all these heart healthy programs and citywide, they all fail. They all start out with, when the cameras are rolling and there's lots of hoopla, they all fail. Health equivalent of the Hawthorne effect. There's one place in North Karelia, Finland. I wrote about it in the Atlantic. It's a great article, I think. I wrote it a few months ago. About this place in Finland, in 1972, had the highest rate of cardiovascular disease in the world. They reversed it by 80%. They brought down a whole population, 150,000 people, in just, and they held it for 3 decades. Like Blue Zones, like North Karelia, it's because they acknowledge the evolutionary baggage we all carry. We are all evolutionarily hardwired to crave fat, to crave sugar, to crave salt, and to take rest whenever we can get it. That's how we survived for 99% of human history, the feast or famine gene. We're hardwired that way. So the notion that you can try to incent this individual and educate the individual or guilt the individual for long enough away from his genetic hardwiring is folly. Never works. But the North Karelia Project, and indeed Blue Zones around the world, they didn't try to convince individuals. The North Karelia Project focused on a life radius. And we sort of borrowed this, but research shows that this is, I know you can't see in the back, but this says 5 miles. So research shows we spend about 90% of our lives within about 5 miles of our home, the average American. You guys are better traveled, I'm sure. But on average, we kind of stick around home. So if you were going to engineer an environment where longevity ensued, what would you do? Well, I got a grant of about $1 million from AARP, and I hired the best minds in America, and we locked ourselves in a room, and we created a blueprint. And this blueprint called, first of all, to optimize the environment of individual homes. What can you do to homes? Well, it turns out you can do a few things to engineer a kitchen so people eat about 100 fewer calories, and you can engineer in about an extra 150 calories of physical activity. In every community, there are about 80% of people who want to change their health habits. They might not be healthy, but they have this contagious inclination to get healthier, putting those people together. And then we know that people who have a sense of purpose and who volunteer have lower BMIs and they live longer. Then every day, we spend most of our waking life in places. Stores, restaurants, kids go to school, our workplace, our faith-based organization. There are 115 evidence-based design tweaks and policies you can put in place so when people show up in these places, they are mindlessly nudged to eat less, move more, and connect. Same thing with policy. According to the CDC, the best investment, if we wanted to make Sun Valley a healthier community, the best return on our dollar would be in policy. When it comes to food, do you live in a place where chips and sodas and fast food is the cheapest, most accessible food, or do you live in a place like Blue Zones where fruits and vegetables are cheapest and most accessible? If there are 6 fast food restaurants within a half a mile of your home, you are 40% more likely to be obese than if there are fewer than 3. Well, there are policies that govern things like that. So it just depends what local officials want to do. There are places like San Luis Obispo where only 9% of people smoke, and there are places like New Richmond, Virginia, where about 39% of people smoke. It's not because they have better smoking programs than San Luis Obispo. It's because a few years ago they decided to denormalize smoking inside and outside. It's not brain surgery. Same with active living. If your streets are walkable and bikeable and parks are cleaned up, and the active option is the easy option, you can raise the physical activity of an entire population by 30%. for everybody, without gym memberships, without ab masters, without yoga classes. Just make it easy. So this is the blueprint, but can you get it to work in America? 2008, we auditioned 5 cities. They had to show us they're ready. The mayor had to sign a pledge, city manager, head of public health, and 5 cities applied. We ended up picking Albert Lea, Minnesota. 19,000 people. They gave us 120 volunteers. We first went in and listened. We got all of the organizations with their feet walking in the same direction. We're going to work together. We brought in Dan Burden, who is kind of the Mozart of the intersection. He can work with cities within budgets to make them walkable. Albert Lea was essentially split in quadrants, 4 neighborhoods, a center. Well, you couldn't walk downtown. Somewhere you had to cut through a field or it was dangerous traffic. Just by connecting 2.5 miles of sidewalks, we created 1 vector so everybody could get downtown. They wanted to widen Main Street, raise the speed limit there. Instead of doing that, we convinced them, you can see at the upper right there, there's a beautiful lake. We convinced them to take a little bit of money and put a trail around. So we didn't give people free t-shirt. We didn't have to give them a break on their insurance. That trail is packed 11 months out of the year now. Just you build and people come. We built 4 community gardens in parks that Parks and Recs was just mowing the lawn. Dr. Brian Wansink, maybe you've heard of his book, Mindless Eating, runs the Cornell Food Lab. He was our co-director. We went in every restaurant. Do you know that every time you go to a restaurant, statistically speaking, you consume between 200 and 300 more calories than you would if you stayed at home? Generally, you should cook at home, but Americans eat out 110 times a year. On average, we eat out a lot. 300 extra calories every time, that's a lot of calories. Well, all we did was engineer out those calories by a few things that actually saved the restaurateurs some money. And then we tried to make meals marginally healthy. Make sure they offered at least 3 plant-based entrees. When you ordered a sandwich, instead of automatically getting fries, we changed the default to fruit. You could ask for fries, but you automatically got fruit. We changed menus, huge opportunity. Changing the adjective on menus, making sure that you could split plates, that you could take home doggy bags. Do you know the adjective that most assures people won't order an entree? The healthy choice. Let me tell you something. Nobody wants the damn healthy choice. When people go out to eat, they want to eat something good. So there are adjectives that actually send the good signal, like sizzle, crispy, crunchy, fresh. So you throw out healthy and you use those other. Well, we took the healthy option salad and made the Italian Primavera salad, and sales went up by 30%. We didn't touch the price or any of the ingredients. So it's just smart. We got the the grocery store chain Hy-Vee to take healthy foods, to create a healthy checkout, so when you're hungry, only healthy defaults are staring you in the face. We got every school in the whole city to agree to sign a Blue Zone pledge and 9 little policy changes. They don't sell sweets as fundraisers. They don't give candy to kids if they get good grades. You know the biggest determinant of whether or not your kid has a healthy experience at school when it comes to food? It's got nothing to do with the school lunch. It's can they eat in hallways and classrooms? If the answer is yes in your grandkids' school, guess what they're eating in hallways and classrooms? It's not the carrot sticks. So we changed that default. BMI goes down 11%. Costs nothing. Just get them to change that default. Then we got about 25% of the adult population to show up and take a pledge. We got them to do some measurement, kind of a more sophisticated version of what I put you through at the very beginning. So we could start with a baseline so we can measure it. They signed our pledge. They had to let our experts come into their homes, make some changes so there was mindless eating. There wasn't mindless eating going on in the kitchen. Trade out the big plates for smaller plates. Dig a garden in the backyard. We asked them to join Moais, like those 3 old ladies who argue about the hot guy. We actually got 1,100 middle Americans to join Moais. Just walk together. Our goal for 10 weeks wasn't to make them walk, but to create friends, because we knew that healthy behaviors are contagious. 5 years later, 60% of them are still together. Long-term intervention, free. And then we gave everybody a free purpose class and immediately speed dated them with volunteer organizations so that they could put their newly found gifts to work. So after about a year and a half, since we were to measure, we saw a 3.2-year bump in life expectancy. We gave them about 7,000 extra years of life expectancy. We trimmed 7,200 pounds from their waistline. But where the rubber hit the road was when healthcare costs went down for city workers. And then all of a sudden the cameras descended. Good Morning America, USA Today twice, ABC Nightly News, Harvard's Walter Willett, writing in Newsweek magazine, came and looked at the project and found the results stunning. And all of a sudden our phone started ringing off the hook. Not because we did what everybody else did, diet and exercise, because it was a new approach in a country that's hurting. And we were able to change the culture there for the long run. They're still on, and by every metric, their health is improving and improves every single year. From there, we try to take on a bigger city. We auditioned cities of 300,000, 55 applied. We ended up choosing the beach cities of Los Angeles, 125,000 people. Very different culture, but the same strategy. Permanent or semi-permanent changes to the environment. That's our mantra. If it's not going to last a long time, we don't spend any of our budget on there. So we worked with city planners there and helped them take their roads and make them fit for humans. Every road in America, every major road in America since the Eisenhower administration was built for cars. We just asked them to build them for humans. So in beautiful places, walking or biking is not so dangerous. You won't let your kid walk to school. We got from about 3% of kids walking to school, now about 38% of kids walk to school. We convinced first Hermosa Beach to go smoke-free and then Manhattan Beach to go smoke-free, inside and out. That alone is going to save tens of millions of dollars, and according to Gallup, who's measured this, smoking rates went down by 30%. BMI went down by 14%. Probably doesn't mean much, but that essentially there are 1,900 fewer obese people than were when we started against California controls. And people reported healthier behaviors. They themselves called it a miracle. From there, the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan of Iowa brought us in. This time we auditioned 90 cities and picked 10. The same strategy. After about a year and a half, smoking is already down. Healthy behaviors are up, and they're going to sign up for a second 5 years. The reddest city of the reddest state, 770,000 people. We just started with Fort Worth, very counterintuitive. Get me in a corner, and I'll tell you some stories about the beef eaters down there and what they thought of a plant-based diet. And then Hawaii, my favorite project in January and February. I'm from Minnesota. Started with Kauai. You see, you have to create a demonstration site and measure and show it works before you can expand it, because every city thinks they're different. And just because it worked in Iowa or Los Angeles doesn't mean it's going to work in our city. So you have to start with the most ready city and then show it works, measure it. Then it's pretty easy to spread it out to contagion. So now we're all over the place. We're in 27 cities. But the same thing, I'm going to sum this up here, and I'm closing down. I'm going to show you guys a strategy. I want you to think about it as individuals, but whether you're an individual, this is how it works. The way we spend money, the way we think of health has been all wrong. Just look at the statistics in our country, the obesity rates, the amount of money we spend on disease. So it really starts with purpose. I'm telling you. People who have a sense of purpose, they have that foundation to want to get physical activity, to want to eat right, to take their medicines, to stay engaged. So it's taking the time to do the internal inventory. What am I good at? What are my values? What do I like to do? What are my passions? What are my skills? And what's an outlet for those skills? You can't just hold your purpose inside. We know that volunteers lower BMI, lower heart disease, and measurably lower health care. It's been replicated, study been done twice. Once you get your purpose straight, then you have to know the right things to do. And I will submit to you that the Blue Zone diet I articulated, mostly a plant-based diet, know how to eat it, big breakfast, eat with people you love, get the TV out of the kitchen so you're paying attention to your food, eat off of smaller plates, that all works. That lacing your house with nudges to get you to move more, that's what's matter, and what matters when it comes to physical activity. Setting up your social circle the right. Make sure you have 4 or 5 true friends who care about you on a bad day. That might require some investment. Friends who eat right, because that's contagious, who are active, also contagious, and who are engaged, also active. Get that right, and most of healthy behaviors becomes very mindless. And then thinking about the community you live in. Ron Eigelhart from the University of Michigan showed that when it comes to well-being, if well-being is a cake recipe, right? You got to marry the right person, you got to make enough money, you need food, shelter, health care, some education, you need to feel like you have meaningful work, you have to be healthy. The one ingredient that has the most variability, the biggest factor, is where you live. You take unhappy people from Moldavia, Soviet bloc country, who report 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, and you move them to Denmark, and within a year they're reporting the health and well-being of their adopted home. Where you live makes a huge difference. If you live in a suburb, you're about 15% more likely to be obese than if you live in an active community. So setting up your home the right way, small plates, make sure there's a fruit bowl, make sure junk food is out of the way. Your house is set up with nudges, having plants, getting rid of as many electronic conveniences as possible, and using hand tools, same with the yard, or just having a yard and a garden, and then owning a dog. I knew some of you liked that one. You can adopt one. So those of you who have dogs, you know your dog needs to get walked every day, several times. So guess who else gets walked every day? The human. It's a perfect long-term nudge. If you're owning a pet, your chance of obesity goes down by about 50%. So you're just healthy. It's a perfect nudge. And then, like I said, looking for the right kind of community with the food environment where you have access to healthy foods, that the streets are made for humans, not just for cars. We all need cars. I'm not going to badmouth cars, but I do like bikes better. Access to recreation, and that you serendipitously bump into your friends. The happiest Americans report about 6 hours of face-to-face, not FaceTime, face-to-face human connectivity every single day. So you want to be in a place where you're bumping into your friends. So this is, none of these exist in isolation. These are mutually supporting, depending, and it's about setting up your life in the right way in the first place, and then kind of forgetting about it, like we see in these blue zones. I assert that's how you create your own blue zones. So I don't have to tell you guys there's big health problems in the country. Chronic disease cost our country about $2.1 trillion a year. And that number could triple in the next decade. About 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. About 40% of us are on track for diabetes, a disease that costs $72,000 a year to manage. And for the first time in living history, life expectancy of our kids could be as much as 5 years less than our own. So we can muck up our own life, but when it comes to our kids, it's time to think about it. Is that because we're stupid? We lack discipline? We somehow lesser people than our ancestors? Or we love our kids less than our parents loved us? Or our parents had better education? No. Our environment has changed. 1970, there were a third as many people were obese than are today. You cannot walk through an airport or go to a pharmacy and buy cough medicine without being rounded up by a gauntlet of sodas and chips and sweets. Discipline's a good thing. Individual responsibility is a good thing. But I can also tell you that discipline is a muscle, and muscles fatigue, and pretty soon your genes take over and you're grabbing the Snickers bar or the Doritos. We're just bombarded by it. We've engineered most of physical activity out of our lives. Raise your hand if you walked to school when you were a kid. Look at that, almost every hand. Now raise your hand if your grandkid walks to school. Okay, we got 10. 1970, over half Americans walked to school. That was free, 3 miles of physical activity every week. You didn't have to pay for it. You didn't need a gym teacher. You didn't need a special grant from the district. 3 free miles of physical activity. We took that out. Meanwhile, childhood obesity has been on the rise for the last 2 decades. Our grandparents burnt about 5 times more calorie in non-exercise physical activity than we do. It's because we've engineered it out. Every single day, about 300 images rinse over our brain, reminding us to eat packaged foods, most of which aren't all that healthy for you. It's hard to beat it. The secret to longevity, whether it's in your own lives or the lives of your community, doesn't rest with your doctor or with the federal government or with pharmaceutical companies. The economics of health in this country are all lined up behind sickness. Nobody makes money unless you get sick. Jack Welch, head of GM. Ah, you're listening. Head of GE had pointed out the folly of incenting for A and hoping for B. The whole system is incentive for sickness, and we hope for health. And lo and behold, by many measurements, we're a sick country. The secret is looking to the populations that have achieved the health and longevity we want and reverse engineering what they have, setting up our environment to mimic theirs, so that the healthy choice is not only the easy choice, that's kind of the buzzword, but that we have the courage to make it the unavoidable choice. I'm going to close with one last story that illustrates the point. Remember Stamitis Moriitis? Old guy who forgot to die, and now he's drinking 200 liters of wine with his friends at 103. I actually called him a while back. I was in a Starbucks in Minneapolis. I called him on Skype, and he picks up the phone. And I've been to his house, so I know what it looks like. He lives in this little whitewashed house his parents lived in, light blue telephone. He picks it up. He speaks perfect English. And he'd just woken up from a nap. It's late afternoon there, and he's serene. And I'm peppering him with questions. I'm writing about him. After about 15 minutes, he goes, "You got to hurry this up. I got friends coming over." I said, "Okay, one last question." I said, "Did you ever figure out how you got cured of lung cancer?" And he goes, yeah, I gave that a lot of thought. He said, "In fact, about 15 years ago, I went back to the United States to get some tests, see if they could figure it out." And I said, "Yeah, what'd you discover?" He said, "Nothing. I got back home and all my doctors were dead." Thank you very much. Thank you. Sure.
We have time for a couple quick questions in the audience.
I can repeat them. Sir?
I think there's a great irony in the technology, and what we crave is to make things easier. And a lot of the stuff like, gee, is it really better that I have to push a button to open my garage door instead of getting out of the car and walking around the car and lifting it up, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't beat ourselves up for it, because in 1915, life was too hard. Now it's too easy. I just think we've over-innovated, or we just have to re-look at what brings us satisfaction. And we are engineered to move, to bear a little pressure. We're engineered to eat the food of our ancestors. We evolved with that food. I think there's wisdom in, you know, not 100%. We're not going to become Luddites and move to a Mennonite farm, but I think moving in that direction will just do us all good.
Yeah.
Great comment.
Today, if you let your kid walk to school, you might get arrested.
I know that story.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might. But if you don't let him walk to school, you face the near certainty he'll be overweight and die prematurely. I think that's a really isolated, and it was a great story. I read that in the New York Times. But you'd be surprised. I'm in 27 cities now, and when you really show them so about 111 kids get abducted every year in America. Yeah, and some of them perceive danger because of traffic. But when you show them that the childhood obesity rates, and you show them that actually statistically it's much more dangerous to put your kid in your car and drive them. You're much more likely to be injured or die. Then they can take a clear-eyed view, and once you show them, it's easier to get them. We have the safe routes to school and walking school bus. So to assuage parents' fears, we get seniors to volunteer who are looking for that purpose, and then they'll lead kids. Just requires some organization, but it's a really good point. Sir?
Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation.
Oh, I love you. I owe you 20.
I have one question, followed by about 500 questions, but I'll limit it to one. You mentioned sourdough bread. My understanding is that sourdough bread, along with a number of other nutrients, have been shown to raise your stem cell production.
Oh, my God, I didn't know that.
So my question was going to be, number one, did you know that?
No.
And what other nutrients? So perhaps the next time you come here, you can look into the value of nutrients in raising your own stem cells.
Yeah, so it's yet another reason to, in America we have sourdough, but you have to be careful because some sourdough, they just put sour stuff in there. The true sourdough is raised slowly, it takes a day or two, and it also has about 1/500th the gluten of bread that uses commercial yeast, because the lactobacillus actually metabolize the gluten. So even though it looks like the same thing, maybe it might have a little sour aftertaste, it's vastly different metabolically.
With all the suggested drinking, did you ever investigate, I mean, this is why a lot of people don't drink, at least that much a day or a week. Did you ever investigate the calories and the sugar results?
Well, so here's my basic, I find places where we know people live a long time, and then what they do, what they've done most of their lives. So most of what I presented you is the average lifestyle of the longest lived people. Sometimes for National Geographic, because you actually have to back up what you say with evidence, I found academic underpinnings for each of the observations. So I can't tell you why in all cases. I can just tell you that on average, people who are living a long time are drinking a little bit.
Join me in thanking Dan for coming to Sun Valley and inspiring us
Let's
tonight.
go get a beer. Thank you.